Hey guys, good morning. How is everyone doing? Today is Saturday, October 24th, 2020, and this is the NFL Week 7 DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports, where we're talking NFL-specific DFS for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. That's October 25th, Week 7 main slate. And in these videos, we're talking everything specific detail about the main slate, the favorite plays, the favorite picks at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, everything you need for DFS, everything you need to be successful again this week 7, this Sunday is covered in this video. So sit back, relax. Let's talk week 7 NFL DFS. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. What's up, guys, and welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports, and welcome to another week of NFL. Hopefully you're here because you like DFS NFL content, because that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes or so. And if you don't, if you clicked on this video, thank you for being here. Hopefully you'll stick around. But more importantly, thank you as always for finding your way here to the channel, clicking on this specific video. If you do enjoy these videos, if you do enjoy NFL DFS, if you've been rolling with us for the last couple of weeks, make sure you give this video a like. And before we get started, as always, I got to ask you guys to please make sure you are subscribed to the channel, whether you're somebody that comes here every single week, that's been doing well with us every single week of NFL DFS, or if you're new here. The only thing I ask of you guys before we get started is to help this channel, support this channel by making sure you are subscribed. But we are talking Week 7 NFL DFS here. It is a little bit of a weird week. We have a lot of exciting action. I am really pumped for this specific week. You can see here in terms of the outlook for this upcoming main slate, it does differ between FanDuel and DraftKings, so keep that in mind. Specifically on the number of games that are being played, you have 11 games on the main slate for FanDuel, 12 games on the DraftKings main slate available to you. And really that comes down to a couple of different things. A couple games got moved. So now we have the Arizona-Seattle game being bumped into the prime time slot at 8:20 Sunday night, whereas then you have the Las Vegas Tampa Bay game moving from prime time up into the 4 o'clock portion of the day in terms of games. So that little bit of a switch has changed things up. I will say, keep that in mind. It's very, very important. On both sites, you will be able to include the later game now. That is the Arizona Cardinals Seattle Seahawks game. So you're talking about basically the slates will not close after 4 o'clock. They're going to be open throughout the night through the primetime game. You can, I don't know if that's going to affect ownership. You can play your Murrays, your Wilsons, your Carsons, your DK Metcalfs. All of those guys are still available both on DraftKings and FanDuel. You don't have to worry about them not counting. They do still count even though that game is at 8:20. Late night hammer, we used to have that in DraftKings a few years ago. Very important to consider if you're trying to do some late swaps, things like that. But on FanDuel, that only counts that game. The Las Vegas Tampa Bay game that was bumped up into the main slate or into the area of the 4 o'clock games, that game doesn't count on FanDuel, but it does count on DraftKings. So a little confusing there. Basically, you have an extra game now available on DraftKings in addition to that late night hammer of the Arizona game. So Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, those players from that specific game are available on DraftKings. Very important for you guys. Again, it's going to help with some ownership. It's going to move things around a little bit, but in general, something you have to consider, especially that late game for late night swaps. Outside of that, we have a ton of options at quarterback this week. I think this is the best week for quarterback in terms of diversity. I think you can go a number of different ways. We'll talk about all of it. I am interested mostly in mid to low priced quarterbacks. I think there's a couple of guys that are of particular interest, which we will talk about. And then I'm looking to spend up at running back. There's some guys that are very expensive that are in smash spots. Hopefully, because of some things that have opened up in terms of value, you see a little bit of lower ownership on those higher priced guys. We'll have to see, but that is kind of the idea there at running back. I'm also going to be at mid to low price for wide receivers, and then I'm going to pay basically mid-priced, relatively speaking, for tight ends, and those guys are fitting kind of into those quarterback stacks. So that's kind of the outlook. Again, keep all of that in mind. Keep the switch of games in mind, all of those different things. I stress to you guys every single week to consider Vegas totals. Now I have them posted here, all of the games that are available on both sites. So obviously, as I mentioned, that last thing there, Tampa Bay at Las Vegas, that only counts on DraftKings. Everything else is in play though on both sites. Number of things to point out here. We have a ton of games projected with a 50 or more over-under. In fact, you can see here you have 7 total games at that number. There are a number of teams also projected with really, really high totals. The couple I want to call out here, Green Bay is over 30. They're number one on the slate right now at 30.5 for an implied team total. They're playing in Houston with a 27 implied team total for Houston. That's a 57 over under on that game. So a lot of juicy fantasy points to be scored in that game. Something to definitely consider. In addition to that, you see some other teams on here. Now, I did adjust this. Basically, I typically want to avoid teams under 20. I usually highlight them red. I've made an adjustment just because this slate is such high scoring. Basically, anything 22 or less, I'm pretty much avoiding in terms of stacks, in terms of players. We can one-off pick players, but in general, that's Carolina, the Jets, Jacksonville, San Francisco, and Denver. All of those teams projected 22 points or less, so probably don't want to go there, especially from a stacking perspective. But take this all in. These numbers will change. They've changed a little bit as I was putting this video together, but something to consider, as always, to kind of get an outlook to set the table for the slate. So let's jump into this slate. Let's start with the quarterback position, as always. I'm going right back to the well here with Matthew Stafford. He's $7,300 on FanDuel, $6,500 on DraftKings, playing on the road this week in Atlanta in the Dome, 55 over/under. Detroit is a slight road underdog at +2, but you always like that close spread, especially for quarterbacks. 26.3 as an implied team total. Really like to go back to Matt Stafford here. Yes, we started him last week. Yes, he was my highest owned quarterback last week, and he didn't do very well. But I submit to you, it was just a matter of bad luck with touchdowns. He still performed very well. They, were tackled a couple times down in the red zone within the 5. He had some red zone targets. They just weren't caught. I think he threw 1 touchdown. Galladay had 105, 110 yards through the air. Stafford just did not get the touchdown, so that is something that you can't always count on. It's hard to predict touchdowns, but in general, I'm going back here this week. That's not going to sway me. In fact, I think that's going to lead to really, really low ownership on Stafford this week, and I like him in Atlanta. So I mentioned slight road underdog here with a solid implied team total of 26 or more. Third fastest paced game, meaning we're going to see a lot more plays, a lot more opportunity, a lot more volume. He's playing indoors in a dome. Have to always like that. That always favors fantasy production, especially at the quarterback position. Detroit has the 11th best pass blocking team in the NFL right now, which is very, very good. Obviously, anything top 10 is really good, and they're just at that border, so he should have time in this game. I will say, if you look at the numbers from Pro Football Focus, it does favor the Atlanta pass rush over the Detroit's blocking. I should say pass blocking, so a little bit of concern there, but I'm still going there with Matt Stafford. Now, why? Because of that Atlanta's defense. That Atlanta defense just cannot guard anyone in terms of wide receivers. They're giving up a ton of passing yards. You can see here, they're allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. Their secondary is graded 20th overall in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. They're allowing a ridiculous 335 passing yards per game. That's 31st overall in the NFL, and a 72% completion rate. That is literally 3/4 of the passes thrown are being completed against them. All of these numbers, that's 30th overall in football, by the way. All of these numbers favor quarterbacks. All of these numbers favor stacks. All of these numbers are favoring Matt Stafford this week. I really like that. Last but not least, Galladay, an elite wide receiver cornerback matchup this week. I will mention him later, but just more juice to the fire here in terms of the Detroit passing attack, the Detroit stack. It's a relatively inexpensive stack overall. I do really like Stafford here at a mid-priced, lower-priced quarterback. Another guy in that lower-priced range, Justin Herbert, $7,500 on FanDuel, $6,400 on DraftKings. He's playing at home this week versus Jacksonville with a 49 over-under, so we're not eclipsing that 50, which does stink because there's so many teams at that number right now, but very, very close here. Still a respectable number. The downside here is the Chargers are minus 9.5 point favorites at home with a 28.3 implied team total. So that 28 plus implied team total is very good, very favorable from a point scoring perspective, but a 9.5 point favorite is something to, give a little bit of hesitation here. This is a riskier play. This is a play that's going to be lower owned, but I do really like Herbert. I think he looked really, really good in week 5. He continues to push the ball down the field. He throws the ball deep. All the things you want out of quarterback, a fantasy quarterback. It's not a dink and dunk guy. This guy can move with his legs a little bit. He's unafraid. He's basically completing balls with guys in his face all day long in week 5. all things I like to see out of a quarterback for fantasy. Herbert showcased that in week 5. Now, he's seeing solid volume, 35 plus pass attempts per game. He's also running the ball a little bit. You see 4 to 5 rushing attempts a game, 10, 15 yards, nothing crazy. But more importantly, I did focus in, he has 2 red zone rushing attempts. So if we can sneak into the red zone here, sneak into the end zone, I should say, in terms of rushing for him, really gives him a solid floor in my opinion. Now, the reason I like him so much is because there's a possible injury to Jackson, their running back. And so there's Kelly and there's Jackson. Kelly is the guy that they drafted. I think they have a lot of stock in him. They're really trying to push him to be, I guess, their lead running back with Eckler out. But Jackson is clearly the better running back. I do not think Kelly is a good running back. And for that reason, if Jackson should miss time, if he is out for this game, I don't think Kelly's going to get it done on the ground at a 9.5 point, favorite at home. I really think they're going to have to rely on Herbert through the air. So I do, for that reason. If Jackson's out, I really like Herbert. Just keep that in mind. Should Jackson be in, should this line continue to go up, I may come down on Herbert. I will be playing him, but he may become my 3rd or 4th guy. Just something I wanted to note there and to be fully transparent with you guys. But assuming Jackson's going to be out or limited, a lot of good things to like here for Herbert. Positive pass blocking advantage. Again, you like to focus on teams that basically their quarterbacks aren't going to get touched. Quarterbacks are going to have time. Typically, Herbert does not have time. The Chargers are not very good in terms of a pass blocking team. But fortunately, Jacksonville is so much worse, so bad at being a pass rush team. Herbert should have time, at least for the first time this season, should have a little bit of time in the pocket. So I think that opens things up for him very, very well, considering he did so well without time. Jacksonville's pass rush, as I mentioned, they're graded 30th overall. So keep in mind, there's only 32 teams. Really bad in terms of a pass rush grade from Pro Football Focus. They're allowing 270 passing yards a game. That's bottom 5 in the league. They're also allowing a 73% completion rate. So we talked about Stafford and Atlanta allowing 72. Worse than them here is Jacksonville at 31st overall in the NFL. 3/4 of passes are being completed. And Herbert has been very efficient, has done very, very well in terms of his completion rates already. So the two mash up very well here. Overall, this is a very, very cheap, very affordable stack. Helps you fit in some very expensive players at other positions, whether it's wide receiver, running back, tight end, if you want to go Kelsey. Kind of the higher price guys fit very well with the Herbert stack that I will mention later on. So 2 guys here, Stafford and Herbert, are my, at least for now, my top 2 quarterbacks worth considering to build around in terms of tournaments. So I should have mentioned that from the very beginning. I'm a very heavy tournament GPP style player. That is where these guys are coming from. That is kind of the philosophy here. These guys will be extremely low owned, give you a ton of leverage should they do well. Moving on to the running back position here, and this is where it's going to start to get pricey because my top 2 guys here are 2-3 of the top 5 most expensive backs on the slate. First and foremost, Alvin Kamara. Hopefully ownership comes down on him a little bit. It is high, but at last I checked, he is right around 3, 4, 5 in terms of ownership on the slate. So he was number 1 for a while. Coming down a little bit more. Man, I love him this week. Playing at home versus Carolina. He is $9,300 on FanDuel, $7,900 on DraftKings, so very, very expensive. But the quarterbacks I mentioned, this legitimately fits with them. So I'm trying to build you guys or give you guys plays that make sense. I could just give you the most expensive players on the slate, but it doesn't work. What I'm giving you in terms of all positions here actually fits into lineups. So Alvin Kamara with Stafford, with Herbert does work. Kamara is the guy on this slate that's checking all boxes from a DFS running back perspective. He's playing at home. They're heavy favorites. He plays a large majority of the snaps, and they have a great team total. It's a 50 over-under versus Carolina at home this week. They're 7-point favorites, touchdown or more favorites, and they nearly have a 30. They're a top 5 team this week in terms of implied team total with 29.3 and nearly 30 points projected for the Saints this week. Now, we all know, I don't have to explain why to play Kamara. He's an elite back, elite, style of play through the passing game, both on the ground and through the passing game. I mean, he eats up 34% of the team opportunities. He's averaging 12 rushing attempts per game. In addition to that, 9 targets per game. So you're seeing 20 plus opportunities a game. By the way, Michael Thomas, at the time of this video, is rolled out. Again, another reason I wait so long, and I apologize to you guys. I know people want to see these videos on Thursdays and Fridays, but the longer we wait, we can get more better information out to you guys. And now we have Michael Thomas out. Not many people have talked about that in their specific videos for DFS this week. Michael Thomas being out opens up, again, more target, more opportunity for Kamara. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry this season, so a very healthy clip when he does run the ball. Carolina's averaging, by the way, Carolina is really, really bad versus the run. If not the worst defense in the NFL, they're probably the worst team against the run so far this season. They're allowing the 6th most points against running backs on the season. Their defense is graded overall in terms of stopping the run 27th overall, and they're allowing a 4.9 yards per carry clip against them. So all these numbers really gel well for both Kamara and Murray, in my opinion. And I should have mentioned Murray is in play also. But in terms of the elite back, the guy to go to this week, top of the price, top of the food chain, it is Alvin Kamara for me. The other guy here that's a little bit expensive is Aaron Jones. And I want to say, before we get started with him, he has missed, I think, Thursday or Friday's practice, has a soft tissue injury with his knee. That is concerning. It obviously knocks him out of play here if he's going to miss the game. And more importantly, Green Bay has been very, very cautious with their players, even at soft tissues injuries. He's saying he's good to go, but he was going to leave it up to the staff. And the staff, again, has been very, very conservative, holding guys out like Adams until they're absolutely 100%. They're aiming for the Super Bowl here, so you don't blame them. But in general, keep that in mind for Aaron Jones this week. You have to check. By the way, if he is out, I am still extremely high on the other running backs, whether that's Dillon or Williams, preferably Williams, probably. But in general, just keep that in mind. Should Aaron Jones be out, feel free to play the other backs in a similar smash spot here. And that's the thing. This is a smash spot for Aaron Jones. I don't think he's going to see extremely high ownership, so it's very, very good. I love playing Aaron Jones in the right spots. He's a guy that can just take down entire tournaments, take down entire slates at the running back position. So let's get started. He's 8,500 on FanDuel, expensive on both sites, 72 on DraftKings. He's playing on the road here, which is a little bit of a bummer. Doesn't check every box that we want, but he is playing Houston, a team you can attack. 57 over-under on this game, so a very, very high number in terms of an over-under. One of the highest I've seen in a while. Points will be scored. Green Bay is a favorite at -3.5 with a 30.5 implied team total. That's number 1 on the slate here. So really, really good things. Still in favor, even though he's on the road here. He's still a favorite on the road, and they do rely on him when they go up. So slight road favorite, I mentioned that already. Highest implied team total. Again, watch that injury designation. Green Bay's run blocking is superb this season. Top 5 overall in the NFL. Aaron Jones himself is averaging 5.2 yards per carry this season. Really, really good clip. Really, really good number there for him. Houston's run defense is basically an elite matchup. We've seen teams so far this season take advantage of them. James Conner in week 2 comes to mind. A guy that was coming off week 1, really, really bad week 1, turned it around, turned his season around, effectively just came back into the picture as an elite back versus Houston. Houston, week 6, they allowed 9.7 yards per carry. No one's going to forget what happened there with Tennessee. The amazing run by, again, Derrick Henry, who just continues to just demolish teams on the ground. But nonetheless, 9.7 yards per carry. Even, what's his name? McMichaels. I forget the backup running back's name for Tennessee. He still averaged a ridiculous clip against Houston in week 6. Their season so far, in terms of Houston's season, they're allowing a 5.4 yards per carry clip. That's 32nd. That is worst overall in the National Football League. So really, really good cake elite matchup here for Aaron Jones for the Packers backfield. And their rush defense, finally, overall from Pro Football Focus, is graded 27. So the two guys I am spending up for, as long as Jones is in, Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones. Two other guys I want to quickly mention here. First and foremost, Kenyon Drake. Now, this is an extremely contrarian style risky play. I don't blame you. I'm going to give reasoning as to why I'm going to play him, but I will also give you reason why you might not want to play him. He is $6,500 on FanDuel, $68 on DraftKings, so a decently low, mid-priced to low-priced price tag for a player here. He's playing at home versus Seattle, so you like that. 55.5 over under. Unfortunately for him, for Arizona, they are home underdogs here at +3.5 with a 26 implied team total. So a solid thing there. Checks a lot of boxes, but does not check that heavy home favorite box. And the thing here, basically, is that he's a contrarian risky play pivoting off the Arizona top plays tough matchup. Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray, in my mind, are going to be the highest owned quarterbacks on this slate. In addition to that, that's going to mean that you're going to see a ton of ownership for Hopkins. You're going to see a ton of ownership for DK Metcalf, for Lockett, for Christian Kirk. All of those guys that fit into those stacks are going to be highly owned. Therefore, in my opinion, if you think logically, that means your Carson and your Drake are very, very good contrarian plays. Easily could demolish those stacks if these guys score, 2 or 3 touchdowns, take away a lot of the touchdowns from those stacks. So that's where my mind's heading for this. I'm not going to be owning 90% Kenyon Drake, but I will be owning him as my risky contrarian play of the week. Again, pivoting off that game that it's a very high total, a lot of scoring coming from that game. Now, I mentioned slight home underdog. That is a little bit of a disadvantage here, but don't be worried about Edmonds. People have talked about Edmonds taking all of his snaps. It's not true. Week 6, he bumped back up to 68, 70% of the snaps. Edmonds only got a couple of handoffs. The only negative here is that Kenyon Drake isn't getting a lot of targets out of the backfield. You like to see that number bump up, specifically on DraftKings. I like him more on FanDuel than DraftKings, full disclaimer there. But he is averaging 18 plus opportunities a game, so he's getting a lot of usage on the ground. Really, really good numbers there. Those numbers are actually increasing over the last couple of weeks. I think he's seeing 20 plus opportunities overall per game. He's tied 4th overall in the NFL. This is a stat that I just pulled out, with 11 red zone rushing attempts inside of the 10-yard line. This guy is getting a lot of usage when they get down into the red zone. I believe positive TD regression is coming for him. Unfortunately, what keeps happening, we had a touchdown stolen by Edmonds in one game, and we have several touchdowns being pulled basically on the option play by Kyler Murray. Specifically last week, Kenyon Drake should have had 3 touchdowns. He had 2, but we saw one quickly get pulled. Drake ran right into the end zone, so easily could have had 3 touchdowns there. But that's a really good thing to see. He's getting red zone usage, which especially on FanDuel is very, very important. 4th overall, top 5 in football right now with 11 red zone rushing attempts. Now, the stuff I want to mention, the disclaimers here are Seattle's rush defense is top 5 on the season. They're very, very good. They're graded high by Pro Football Focus. The numbers themselves support the fact that they are a good defense versus the rush this season. Really bad versus the pass, by the way. That's why everyone's going with Murray here. But in general, just keep that in mind. It is a contrarian risky play. It's not a cash game play. It's a GPP only play, something to consider. Last but not least here, I look back, a little bit of game log chasing here. He did face Seattle in Seattle last year, 24 attempts, 166 rushing yards, averaged nearly 7 yards per carry, and had 2 touchdowns. Can we get that again? Let's hope. That's going to really trash this slate if so, and we're going to take all the money from everyone if that happens. Last guy I will mention here, a guy that's going to be possibly the highest owned player on the slate, is Gio Bernard. So if you've been living under a rock the last couple of days, if you haven't been following DFS, Gio Bernard is going to likely start for the Cincinnati Bengals playing at home versus Cleveland. What has happened? Joe Mixon has been rolled out. That's basically the end of the story here. As a result, this $4,800 FanDuel, $4,500 DraftKings Gio Bernard player is going to become uber chalk. You understand why I almost didn't recommend him here, because I do hate playing that super chalk. But the price tag on him does make it very hard to avoid here. $4,800 on FanDuel, $45 on DraftKings, playing at home versus Cleveland, 50.5 over under. Cincinnati is a home underdog at plus 3.5, 23.5 implied team total. So you have the numbers there. This is easily the slate's best value running back. You're going to see an uptick in usage with Mixon out. Last week, if you just rewind the tape, when Mixon went down, you saw 11 total touches for Gio Bernard in week 6, including 1 red zone rushing attempt, which did lead to a touchdown. So that's good. That is the concern, is how much actual ground game usage will Gio get. But you saw the red zone rushing attempt last week. You saw the touchdown. You have to like that. The backup running backs no one's even heard of behind Gio. So I do have a little bit more confidence than I probably let on here in Gio Bernard, at least not busting. But again, he's going to be mega chalk here. If that's not something you're into, if you don't need to save the money and go down to him, he does help a lot of different ways with playing other players. I don't know if I'm going to completely go there, but it's worth mentioning. It would be unfair to you guys, non-transparent, if I didn't at least mention him here. And again, this is why we wait until Saturday, because a lot of this news came out later. So Gio Bernard definitely in play here. I do believe it's pretty surprising that the spread is so close. You would think that the Cleveland Browns would just run away with this game, even though they're on the road here. but in general, it is a surprisingly close spread. I think that's good for Gio. I think that's good for Cincinnati's offense generally. He does get obviously heavy usage in the passing game. He's typically a third down back. And in the event Vegas is correct here, Cincinnati goes down early, they're trailing, they throw the ball 50 times like they did against Cleveland early in the season, I do believe that still plays favorable to Bernard. I think that's probably even a better situation for Bernard here. Now, I will mention Cleveland's defense on paper so far this season looks good, but in general, I will say that it's surprising. They're not that good. If you really dig into the numbers, if you look at who they've played, all those different factors, and if you go back specifically to Week 6, we recommended James Conner because we believe Cleveland's defense was overrated from a rushing stop perspective, and it turned out very, very well. Well, this week, or I should say go back to Week 6, their rushing defense overall graded well below average. It dropped them from a Pro Football Focus standard to basically overall for the season right in the middle of the pack for all teams. But that number specifically for Week 6 was so bad, they're actually bottom 10, possibly even bottom 5 overall in football versus the run. So really good thing to focus in on there, kind of a little bit of a deeper dive into the data. Now the disclaimer I have here at the bottom, this dude, Gio Bernard, hasn't had double-digit touches since 2018. And in 2019, he did get 2 starts. He had 8 total touches in those 2 starts with Joe Mixon being out. So that is what concerns me. It's a little bit risky. I do like looking back to Week 6 and seeing what Gio did when Joe went down. I do think that makes it a little bit more of a comfortable play. It takes a little bit of the, I guess, scare away from it. But there's always the fact that if you go back to previous seasons, this dude is not built for double-digit running attempts. This dude is not meant for that style of play. It's a little bit worrisome here. Something I just want you guys to consider if you're going to be playing him. Now, in terms of wide receivers, I think there's basically a million different plays this week. Naturally, that correlates with the fact that there's so many quarterbacks to play. I'll mention my top 4 here, but keep in mind, a lot of this can change, will change from my perspective. I'm going to have to see how ownership plays out. That is always very important to me from a GPP perspective. But in terms of the guys I'm listing right now, I do believe these are going to be some of my highest owned players, core plays from a number of different reasons. And they do fit basically with the quarterbacks, with the running backs I mentioned. First and foremost, DeAndre Hopkins. And I don't like to typically give a wide receiver and a running back from the same team, but it does work here. DeAndre Hopkins, again, just in a smash spot. Not that you need to know that. Elite receiver, elite targets, all the things you want out of a wide receiver. But from a DFS perspective, he's $9,000 this week. Very, very expensive on FanDuel. $8,200 on DraftKings. Also very expensive over on DraftKings. I mentioned he's playing in that late night hammer game, that 8:20 primetime game Sunday night. It will count here on both sites. He's playing at home versus Seattle, 55.5 over-under, so a super high over-under in that game. Arizona themselves are a home underdog, usually favors the passing game, favors DeAndre Hopkins, 26.0 implied team total. So all the numbers very good in terms of what you want from a wide receiver Vegas total. I think those all play into Hopkins, play into Murray here. Now, the numbers I'm going to give you, you kind of know this already. Again, elite guy, doesn't need much of an explanation as to why and when you should start him. It's pretty much every week, but I will give you what I got on him. Top 5 wide receiver cornerback matchup, plus 31%. So far for the season, he is Pro Football Focus's top-rated wide receiver. Best receiver in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, at the moment through 6 weeks. He's averaging 10-plus targets a game. That's yum-yum sauce for fantasy football for DFS. Number 1 overall on this slate with a 32% team target share. Number 2 on this slate with a 2.76 yards per route run. So he's getting obviously a heavy amount of targets. He's also getting targets down the field. He's getting the targets that matter. And so what does that mean from the matchup here? How does that play into the Seattle defense? Well, Seattle's defense is bad versus the pass. They're allowing the most passing yards overall in the NFL right now. They've allowed 7 100-yard wide receiver games so far this season, and they're allowing the single most amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So you get it why. I mean, this guy's an elite receiver, and then you just couple all of that information together. He's pretty much a must play in my book this week, week 7, playing at home versus Seattle. But another guy that's rivaling DeAndre Hopkins being a must play for me is Keenan Allen this week. His price is just too low. $7,000 on FanDuel, $6,200 on DraftKings. He's playing at home versus Jacksonville, 49 over under. Everything I mentioned for Herbert plays into Allen here. In fact, this is the stack with Herbert. This is the guy I'm matching up more times than not with Herbert in terms of my stack. They are 9.5-point favorites with a 28.3 implied team total. Love the implied team total. Don't really like that 9.5-point favorite at home number versus Jacksonville, but nonetheless, I'm still going with Herbert. I'm still going with Allen here. Price is just simply too low. I'm probably playing a lot of Allen in non-Herbert lineups also. Again, I think it's a value play here. This dude is just doing so much with Herbert under center. He's easily Herbert's favorite target on the year so far. Now you're thinking 4 games with Herbert so far. He's the second highest rated wide receiver on the slate, just behind the guy we talked about. That's DeAndre Hopkins. He's gotten 5 red zone targets in 4 games with Herbert. You like to see that. He's not only getting targeted, throughout the game, throughout the main course of the field, he's also getting high valuable targets in the red zone. He's had double-digit targets in weeks 2, 3, and 4 with Herbert under center. Likely would have had it again if I had to guess in week 5, but he got injured very quickly in that game after catching a touchdown, by the way, a red zone target. But nonetheless, he's getting double-digit targets every single week, yet he's priced $7,000 on FanDuel, $6,200 on DraftKings. He's healthy. He's coming off of a bye here. Him and everyone else on that team had time to really rejuvenate and get healthy after getting banged up in week 5. He's second on the slate, again, likely behind our guy we just mentioned, DeAndre Hopkins, with a 31% target share. So just take that into consideration. Everybody talks about Hopkins and the target share he has, the ridiculous target share. It's 32%. 31% is Keenan Allen, and he's $2,000 cheaper on both sites. I just love that for Allen here. I'm definitely going to be getting a ton of exposure to Allen. He's top 10 also on this slate in yards per route run at 2.36, and he's the 3rd best overall wide receiver cornerback matchup at plus 44% versus Jacksonville. I don't have anything listed here for Jacksonville. I probably should. Jacksonville, just like I mentioned with Herbert, is very bad versus the pass. They give up like three quarters of the passes against them are completed, give up a ton of yards through the air. Really bad in terms of, I think, bottom 10 in coverage grade from Pro Football Focus. So everything again favoring Keenan Allen here. Moving on to 2 other guys, and I'll try to pick this up a little bit the pace here. Kenny Golladay, I'm going to pair him directly with Stafford, going right back to the well here. $7,600 on FanDuel, $67 on DraftKings. At Atlanta, 54.5 over under. Detroit is an underdog on the road here with a 26.3 implied team total. All great numbers for Stafford, meaning all great numbers for Golladay here. Slight price bump from last week. I think he went up about $200, $300, $400 on both sites, but it's still priced too low in my opinion. He had a very good week 6. He had 100 plus receiving yards. Again, just did not find the end zone. It's a close spread here against Atlanta on the road in the dome. They should trail. They should pass a lot. There should be more volume. All the things you want basically for a wide receiver. I mentioned week 6, really good numbers. Just did not find the end zone. 5 red zone targets since his return in week 4, I think. I don't know. Whatever. He's only been back for a couple of weeks. Snap count continues to increase. He's getting high valuable targets also in that offense, which is what you want out of a wide receiver. Again, really good price on him too. So keep that in mind as we discuss all of this. He's top 10 on the slate in team air yards at 35%. He's the single best wide receiver cornerback matchup on the slate at 67%, plus 67%. That is a ridiculously high number. Hard to avoid Kenny Golladay in my opinion this week. Now, in terms of the defense he's facing, Atlanta is basically not good, right, against the pass. They're allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and their overall graded secondary is 20th in the NFL. So all really bad numbers for that Atlanta team. I really like Kenny Golladay, obviously paired with Matt Stafford. And last but not least here, I want to talk about Terry McLaurin. He's $7,100 on FanDuel. That price it's okay, right? I'm not overly attracted to $7,100 for McLaurin on FanDuel, but the price on DraftKings is $5,800. He's going to be highly owned because he is probably the best value receiver on the slate, relatively speaking, right? $5,800 on DraftKings is just criminally low. It's insanely low. I don't know what happened there or why, but in general, it's a great matchup, right? He's playing at home versus Dallas, 44.5 over under. Washington is a slight home underdog at +1. Really low implied team total, 22.5. So you don't really like that. There's not a lot of good things pointing to a shootout here or anything like that, but Terry McLaurin has done a ton of damage so far this year with basically zero quarterback play. Essentially, this is the Allen Robinson of Washington. He's an incredible, great, talented receiver, regardless of what quarterback is playing. He's getting the targets. He's getting everything you want. If you had better quarterback, this dude would be a top 10, top 5 receiver every single week. Fortunately, you don't. But in general, he's maintaining 9 to 10 targets a game. TD positive regression is coming here, in my opinion. He's getting red zone targets. He's getting targets. He's just not scoring touchdowns. He's been really, really successful this season, regardless of who is playing quarterback. So you have to like that. Top 10 overall in team target share at 27%. Probably the most surprising and best stat for him this year is number 1 overall in the NFL in team air yards at 44%. So not only is he getting a third of the targets for the team, but he's getting targets downfield. He's eating up the air yards of that team. It's a stat that I rely on heavily when selecting receivers. Really makes him stand out here. Terry McLaurin for Washington. Now, overall, top 10 wide receiver cornerback matchup, plus 30%. In terms of the matchup, in terms of the defense, we all know Dallas cannot guard anyone. Every game they've basically had is a shootout. Unfortunately, like Dak Prescott, so things are changing, but the defense is still the same here. They are the worst graded secondary according to Pro Football Focus at 32nd overall in football. Again, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, there's only 32 teams, so they're dead last in terms of a secondary grade. And they're allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Definitely Terry McLaurin on DraftKings, worth considering on FanDuel, but that $5,800 price tag on DraftKings is a superb value play. I will be getting a ton of exposure to McLaurin there on DraftKings. Now, the position we all hate talking about, tight ends. There's 2 guys that I would say there's one guy I'm really interested in here. Another guy that I will consider playing. Hunter Henry, definitely in play. Probably my most favorited tight end so far in week 7. I think he's an excellent play this week at $5,800 on FanDuel, $4,500 on DraftKings. Pairs perfectly with Herbert, so you're basically getting that 1-2-3 punch there with Allen, Henry, and then the quarterback, obviously. He's playing at home versus Jacksonville. Everything I mentioned again, 49 over/under. Unfortunately, a huge favorite at minus 9.5 playing at home, but the good thing is they have a 28 plus implied team total. Now the price, the salary for Hunter Henry, very solid here, mid-tier price or down. I think, relatively speaking, there's no other tight end around his price tag that gets you what Hunter Henry gets you. He stacks well. I talked about with Herbert, with Allen, that overall Chargers stack. He's playing 87% of the snaps so far in the season, so he's not a guy that's, coming off the field much. He's averaging 6 to 7 targets a game with Herbert. That's not an elite number, but in terms, again, of his price tag and the guys that are fitting around him are cheaper, there's not really anyone else that's doing that, so that's why I like Hunter Henry so much. He's 4th overall, in fact, among tight ends with a 21% target share. So he's priced, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range of tight ends, yet he's getting the 4th most amount of usage of all tight ends. So you do have to like that. If you talk about Waller, Kelsey, Kittle, this guy's right behind them. I wouldn't say right behind them. He's 4th behind them in terms of that target share percentage. In addition to that, the stat we always talk about, 84% routes run. That's pass play snaps. So this guy is coming onto the field. When he's on the field for pass plays, he's not blocking, he's running routes. So that's what you want out of a tight end. And then to talk about his matchup, Jacksonville, a very good matchup for tight ends, giving up the 5th most amount of fantasy points to the tight end position. And then finally, last but not least here, if you believe in Pro Football Focus's tight end matchup, he's 2nd overall with a plus 28% matchup. The other guy I will quickly mention, TJ Hawkinson, again, pairs with Stafford if you want to go there. It's not my favorite play in the world, but again, sticking to my philosophy, my strategy this week, this is the range I'm sticking in with tight ends. $5,900 on FanDuel, $5K on DraftKings, playing on the road in Atlanta, 55 over/under. Detroit it's everything I mentioned with Stafford. It's everything I mentioned with Galladay. I think he fits very well into that stack as a cheaper option. He is coming off 2 bad games. I'm not going to hide that fact. He's going to see lower ownership as a result, but he is still maintaining solid usage, just has not done much over the last couple of games. He has an elite 92% routes run. Talked about that with Hunter Henry. TJ Hawkinson's is much higher. It's actually one of the best overall for tight ends in the NFL right now. So on pass plays, this dude is out there running routes. For that price tag, you like that. Again, I do like Hunter Henry more, but I do like TJ Hawkinson. I think he is in play this week. He has 4 red zone targets. Here, he did have 4 red zone targets in week 6. So yes, he had a bad game, but man, 4 red zone targets, that's more than most wide receivers in the NFL in a given week. Things could have changed. He could have caught 2 touchdowns in that game very easily and changed really the outlook and really his ownership this week. but he didn't. So you like to see the fact still that Stafford is looking his way in the end zone. He's averaging about 5 targets a game, so a decent number. As long as he's getting red zone targets, that's what we're targeting here for Hawkinson. It's a great turnaround spot versus Atlanta. Atlanta is allowing the second most fantasy points to the tight end position, and overall it is a positive, solid matchup according to Pro Football Focus at plus 9%. So a couple cheap options there, mid-price guys. I do like Henry. I do like Hawkinson. And so those cover the core plays, the guys that I will definitely be building lineups around one way or another, guys that will get a ton of exposure to. But this is a bigger slate. There are a ton of options, both at quarterback, both at running back, and wide receiver. I think there's a million different ways you can go. 2 guys that are definitely in play. I'm not going to avoid Russell Wilson. I'm not going to avoid Kyler Murray. I'm not listing them here because, again, I'm trying to pay up at running back and get a little contrarian at quarterback. These 2 guys are going to be the highest 2 owned guys on the slate. We know this. They're great for cash games, Wilson especially, but I do like both Murray and Wilson. I've listed a couple other quarterbacks there. These guys are still kind of in my carousel of consideration. We'll see how it plays out, but those other guys do have an attractive spot and some numbers pointing to some upside there. And then in terms of running backs, Kareem Hunt, I think, is going to be the highest owned running back on the slate, at least according to right now, either him or Gio Bernard. Both those guys in play. Obviously, I mentioned Bernard, but Kareem Hunt, running back for Cleveland, definitely in a good spot playing Cincinnati. I do really like Ezekiel Elliott, and here's why. Simple fact that, yes, he is expensive. He's going to see like 15, maybe even 10% ownership. Anytime you can get this guy with that kind of ownership, regardless of the spot he's in, regardless of the fact he's on the road, you want to take advantage of that. This guy can, again, wreck slates. He's a late back, catches a ton of balls, all those things you want. He's been fumbling a lot. Hopefully that stops this week, but he's kind of taking some ownership on that. Hopefully he's going to turn things around this week. I do like Ezekiel Elliott a ton this week. I just couldn't list him realistically in the core plays because of salary. Chris Carson, I talked about why I like Kenyon Drake. Similar deal here. If you want to pivot off the high-owned guys in those slates or that particular game, that late-night hammer game, Chris Carson does stand out. And he's getting decent usage. If you're talking about DraftKings, decent usage in the passing game also. David Johnson in a good spot playing at home. Green Bay really struggling versus the run the last couple of years. Still continues this year. I do like David Johnson, a guy that's getting like 90% of the snaps at running back, or really just in general on that team. So I do like David Johnson for sure. And I do mention here very quickly, Josh Kelly and Jamal Williams. Both those guys become in play as value plays, kind of differentiating off of Gio Bernard for value in the event the guys ahead of them or the guys playing with them are hurt. So that's Aaron Jones for Jamal Williams, and then that's Jackson for Josh Kelly here. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying play them right now. I'm saying keep in mind if there's injuries, if guys are rolled out ahead of them, those guys become good spot plays. Other wide receivers that are in play, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill. DK Metcalf's going to see tons of ownership. But again, talking about that game, hard to avoid that Seattle-Arizona game, especially late at night. DK Metcalf in another smash spot, just an elite receiver, turning into one at least right now. Tyreek Hill, no one's talking about him. So if you want a guy that can break slates, a guy that can turn 4, 5, 6 targets, he's not getting a ton of targets right now, but turn those into 3 touchdowns and 400 yards. Tyreek Hill's that guy. So consider him if you really want to get crazy at the wide receiver position, a guy that will go lower owned. I really like Tyler Boyd. Inside receivers have been doing very well against Cleveland. I do like Tyler Boyd in the spot he's in, and he's been performing very well this year so far. DJ Chark, a guy to come back with at Jacksonville. Also Chenault for Jacksonville. Both receivers doing very well. I suspect Jacksonville will trail. I talked about playing, Herbert and guys at home against Jacksonville. These are the guys I'll be coming back with more than likely. Not really interested in Robinson. I'm interested in the trailing wide receivers. In terms of value, Deontay Johnson standing out. Traquan Smith standing out with both Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas are out for New Orleans. So Traquan Smith definitely in play here as a value play at wide receiver. Briefly talked about Deontay Johnson. Just price is too low for him. He keeps getting hurt. Everyone's talking about Claypool. We'll play Claypool, but this guy I think is still the starter when he comes back. He is back this week. Banged up his back a little bit last week. So Deontay Johnson is just priced way too low on both sides. Last but not least here, Demarcus Robinson for Kansas City. Sammy Watkins is out. This is the guy that's playing. I think he played the most amount of snaps over Tyreek Hill at 90%. So price is pretty cheap on him. Definitely worth considering for Kansas City. And then if you're going to pay up a tight end, the number one guy is Travis Kelce. I'm not playing Kittle. Kittle more than likely will be shut down as the best player by New England, by Belichick. So I will be going with Travis Kelce for Kansas City. And we covered a ton of information there. This is a bigger slate than normal. There's a ton of action. There's a ton of points to be scored, a ton of Vegas totals suggesting that games are going to be pretty high scoring. In addition to that, I had a ton of interest in quarterbacks, wide receivers. So hopefully overall this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully we covered enough that you guys can make the best, most informed decisions when setting your lineups. But before we go any further, I do always mention down in the description is Daily Fantasy Nerd. It's the optimizer I use. Feel free to click the link down there. You will get a free month. It's worth checking out, ladies and gentlemen. It is, in my opinion, the best optimizer available. It's not utilized by many people and in the industry because they're all promoting their own, their big ones. As a result, what you get out of those optimizers, if you're setting multiple lineups out of Daily Fantasy Nerd, then no one's really going to be playing that except for me and you. So definitely check that out. Again, a lot of good information there. Turns around value, turns around stacks, turns around anything you could possibly want to build better lineups in DFS. Daily Fantasy Nerd has what you need. I use it for these videos. I also use it to be every single week, and we've been very, very successful in multi-entering with Daily Fantasy Nerd. But you guys don't want to hang around any longer. You're ready to set lineups. Hopefully this video helped you get there, helped you be more informed. I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments if I've missed anyone, if there's any plays that are starting to creep up that I didn't talk about. I'd love to hear about that. You guys have done a great job over this season, really, and I really am thankful for you guys subscribing, being a part of these channels, paying attention. It does mean a lot to me. Just please, again, make sure you are subscribed to the video, like this video if you find it helpful, useful. But besides that, as always, good luck this weekend, good luck in week 7, and I will catch you in the next video.